Hello, everyone. Welcome to the Movieception Show. My name is Fariba, and today I want to take the time to talk about the one show that everyone's literally talking about because it's just now been out on Netflix for about a couple days now, and that is Squid Game Season 2. Now, this is going to be very different, just because I know, typically speaking, whenever I would actually do any sort of episode review, reaction, discussion, etc., I typically would do a reaction video for each of the episodes. But this one's going to be very different just because of just how the format usually is for Netflix. And this is one of the key reasons why I don't really do a lot of Netflix shows in general. It's just because I just don't like their format where they drop all their episodes all at once. And it just makes it very difficult for someone like me because that means I have to do reactions to all the episodes and I have to basically rush myself just to get through all the episodes just because we live in an environment where people are, going to spoil things online. And especially for major shows like Squid Game and Stranger Things, heck, Wednesday, the last thing I want is to, have to wait, taking a long break in between or something like that and then accidentally spoil myself just because I end up on like maybe the wrong part of the site. And it's really difficult for me, especially because of where I work. So as a result of that, that's one of the reasons why I didn't do a reaction video for season 2. I had thought about it. I'd considered it. I decided not to, although I will admit there are some regrets I have, especially because there were a lot of twists and turns that I feel like my reaction would have been worth recording, but it's all right. I feel like the best approach to talking about Squid Game Season 2 and discussing it with you guys is to just do it through like a discussion review, kind of a mix of both, really. But I will try to figure out a way to maybe do something with reactions with Netflix shows, especially for something like Squid Game Stranger Things Season 4, because I know that's something that I've been trying to figure out, especially going into the new year, because we're going to actually have both Stranger Things Season 5 and Squid Game Season 3 coming out both in 2025. So, and there are literally Netflix's biggest shows on their platform. So I'm going to try and figure out something with that. But this is the best option I have right here. So, but yeah, I mean, let me just say that I wish Netflix would just stop doing this binge thing. I know a lot of people, there's this whole, I know I'm digressing a little bit, but I know there's this whole kind of like this debate about whether people like to watch things all the episodes dropped or watching a weekly basis. I definitely lean on the weekly basis because it makes it a little easier for me to catch up on things without having to be concerned about spoilers. Plus, I feel like doing a weekly basis, it helps to enhance the whole experience of having a discussion and talking about things on a weekly basis rather than, if it was all dropped at once, people are just going to be talking about, in most cases, the ending. Although, yeah, there are a few cases where a lot of people will be talking about things or like some of the highlights from a whole season, like in the case with Squid Game Season 2, per se. But in most cases, usually by the ending that people will be talking about. So it's just like, I don't like that kind of format. I'm usually one like, let's kind of like digest each episode bit by bit. Let's talk about it. And then we have that week. But again, I mean, that's just how Netflix is. I mean, I believe most streaming services have now switched to the weekly basis, although it's really just it's like a case by case situation. I know, for instance, Disney once used to do a whole like drop of all their episodes all at once. But then they shifted to like weekly. I think the exception may have been with Echo. While I think Max may have also done a binge at one point, but then switched to weekly. So again, I think weekly is the best approach to doing things. I think that alone is also allows a show to elongate its success and its engagement with audience. That's just my argument with it. But again, Netflix has a unique platform that they want to stick with. That's fine. I'm going to figure out a way to adapt to something like this with my channel, especially because, again, it's really tough just to do something like binging everything all at once in one sitting, just because, again, I'm a very busy person, but I'll figure something out. I mean, especially now that having seen season 2, there are a little bit of regrets I do have. So that being the case, I'm going to do this. So the way I'm going to be addressing and discussing about Squid Game season 2 is I'm going to be just I'll be dividing into kind of like in two sections. The first section is going to be really just my overall impression about season 2, my thoughts about it, because I know there's quite a discussion going on about just the content for season 2 and its comparison to season 1 and whether or not it lives up to the expectations. I know that's quite an intense conversation going on online, so we'll talk about that in a second, as well as just giving my overall just impressions about what's transpired in the season, as well as what this would mean for season 3, because we know that season 3 is going to be the last season, as well as some of the developments and just some of the updates that we've gotten since season 2. So that's how I want to try and address this, this whole video. That's gonna be a mix of review plus a discussion and just my thoughts and even speculation. So yeah, without further ado, let's get right down into Squid Game season 2, because I've been wanting to talk about this. I've been thinking about this for the last few days right now. It's just like, you know what, I want to talk about this. This is the best way to do it. So let's get right down into it. So just to kind of rewind back a little bit, it's no surprise that I have seen Squid Game. I am a fan of it. I remember actually, when the show was coming out 3 years ago, I was aware that there was going to be a lot of hype behind it, that was going to be one of the biggest shows, even before its release, because where I work, we were kind of speculating that it was going to be a big show. We were actually getting a lot of things ready ahead of time just to make sure that, if the engagement was there, that we were getting ready for that. So and indeed the show blew up like big time. A lot of people were talking about it. I saw some of my friends were talking about some of the episodes and just the show in general, and then the whole hype was there. I did not jump on the show immediately, like on the day of its release, because again, I just didn't know, just my first impression about the show, because I wasn't too familiar with Korean content at that point, aside from just having seen Parasite. I think Parasite was maybe the one Korean movie show in general that I have ever seen in my life. That's not to say that I actually have any issues with subs or reading subs or anything like that. I'm used to that because I've watched Bollywood, of course, just that I'm not too familiar with just the K-pop, K-drama side. Yes, I know the details of it. I'm aware of the culture phenomenon, but I've just never really been into it, like, in a more general sense, like a lot of people are. So, it didn't take me until, like, maybe 3 days after the show had premiered that I actually finally jumped into the show. I didn't binge, like hardcore binge it like a lot of people did. But I will say I was very hooked on the show. It did take a while for me to get into it, but once you really get deep into the games and see what some of these characters are, and realizing how humane and how personal and how intriguing they are, like, it's like you're rooting for them to succeed in this game. And then of course, like, as you get deep and deeper into the show, the more hooked you get, the more invested you get, the more you get addicted to the actual show. And that's what ended up happening with me. I actually got my dad to watch the show just this past week. I was like, hey, just watch Squid Game because it's like one of the biggest shows. And when he started watching season 1, he literally binged the whole thing in one setting. Like, he started at 9 p.m. in one night, and then he finished up to 4 a.m. finishing all 9 episodes in one sitting. I was like, oh my god. My mom was like, yeah, I saw him like watching the show at 3 a.m. He was very addicted to it. I was like, whoa, wow. So it happened with my dad, it happened with me. Of course, with season 1, what made the show so spectacular is just a novelty for it. Now, of course, for someone like me who's a huge Hunger Games fan, this is not the whole idea of, going into competition where you're trying to win a prize, which may require some very deadly consequences. It's not too unfamiliar for me. I've read the Hunger Games, I've watched the Hunger Games. It's a very similar kind of idea that they incorporate into this show, although it is still very different, right? Everything that we see in Hunger Games is very different from Squid Game. Hunger Games is a whole dystopian world. Squid Game is like, it still integrates kind of this real world that we do live in, but it's like, it's still very fictional. But at the same time, it's very heavy in the social commentary and driving very deep into just kind of how humans react to things, especially when they're in a situation where they're very desperate, especially in a case where they don't have a lot of money, where they're very poor, where they really need something to kind of get themselves out of debt. And so this show was very intriguing for that main reason, just to see how humans react, how human beings react to this chance of going into a game where they can win money to help pay off their debt, to give them a second life, but knowing for a fact that there is consequences to it, which is meaning that, blood must be shed. So, yeah, I mean, it's a very intriguing concept, something that, again, I'm very familiar with, but also just watching the series, I was very addicted to. I think what made the show so great is that not only was there the novelty for it, but just the characters that we had, whether it be gi-hun, Se-byeok, Ali. I mean, we all were rooting for these characters to make it through from beginning to the end, only to see that, we saw the consequences of it. I think, again, because it is such a novelty series where we don't really know the consequences or what the end game was going to be, at least for that whole game, that we didn't know what the stakes were. We didn't know whether or not these characters actually have the capability of surviving. I mean, a lot of us, here, at least in the American, watching these American content, like a lot of times the heroes do make it through to the end, but will this be the same with a Korean drama? And I think that seeing that they do take a lot of risks, they do showcase a lot of that high stakes, that the show was so great, so addicting, but so nerve-wracking, but also just chilling. And I think that it really did such a great job of setting the suspense and thriller from the beginning to the end, and doing so in a way that the writing is very tight, the characters are very well developed, because I think each character had something that made you root for them. Even some of the more antagonistic ones, you can still sympathize with them, with why they are, why they're involved in the game and why they are the way they are. It's just like, it's a very well done season. It's just like, there's a reason why, Squid Game was so beloved by so many people and why it had so much acclaim. It's no surprise that there's going to be a lot of expectations going into season 2. I mean, let's be honest. I mean, for those who don't know the stats about Squid Game, so the season 1 is actually Netflix's most viewed series ever, and this is combining even English language shows. I believe the most viewed English language show, so that's like mostly what most Americans would watch, I think is Wednesday season 1, and I believe the average for that was like 256 million viewership or something around that. Squid Game even topples that. I believe the total for that is very close. It was like 265 million, which means that it is literally Netflix's like gem. It's their most popular, most watched series of all time in all categories. Just at least in the TV sphere. I don't know about the movie sphere, but at least in TV sphere, it is their most popular content. A lot of people have watched it from across the world. I would expect the same thing with season 2 when we start to get a little bit of an idea of what the numbers are going to look like. Again, we're not going to get the actual data for that until maybe 30 days after, but I mean, I would expect that season 2 is going to have an even bigger number, just because of the fact that so many people love season 1 that, oh my god, they want to follow up and see where the story is going to go, especially given just how season 1 had ended with gi-hun and how he decided to remain in South Korea and go on this mission to try and stop the games once and for all. So, too, right? I knew for a fact that it was going to have a lot of difficulties in terms of expectations. I already had like some qualms about it as for myself, because I'm just like, well, season 1 was almost near perfect. It's just, how can you replicate much of the suspense and thriller from season 1 and try to replicate that in season 2? Because we already lost the novelty. A lot of the characters that we loved have died in season 1. The only main characters that we have, I think, are maybe 4 returning characters, and 3 of them were basically the main ones. So that's gi-hun, that's In-hoon, and so In-hoon is the front man, for those who don't know, and then Jung-ho, so that's the detective guy. So, and then of course Jung-bae, but Jung-bae was like shown briefly in season 1, and he's now here in season 2 actually as a main character. So we don't have a lot of main characters returning this season, so most of season 2 characters are going to be new, which makes sense because you're going to have brand new characters joining in a whole new session of the games, and let alone, it's just like, where do you go from there? What is going to be gi-hun's goals and expectations. Like, where is this gonna go? Are we gonna go back to the games? Are we gonna go, or is he gonna be more behind the scenes? Of course, we had the trailers come out, and indeed it does confirm that Gi-hun was going to go back into games for a second time and actually be very involved in trying to stop the games and trying to convince people to leave the game as soon as possible. So that was something that we kind of got a glimpse of the last few months. But beyond that, just like, okay, well, where can they go from there? Are we gonna have the repeats of the games? What does this mean in terms of the whole detective and the front man? Because it's just like, how will they be involved? There was a lot of questions going to season 2, and whether or not season 2 can even, in any case, just be half as good as season 1. I know I had my concerns about this, which again is probably one of the reasons why I decided not to do a reaction video, because I didn't think there's going to be that many twists and turns, at least not in the same capacity as season 1. So again, and let me just say that when I started watching season 2, right? So I actually was wide awake. I was awake when the show had just premiered. Like, I'm talking 3 a.m. on the dot when it jumped on Netflix. I did get to see the first 2 episodes because I was like, you know what? I need to at least watch something because I know I had work later in the day. Now, thankfully, I do work remotely, so it wasn't like a big deal. I was able to just, go to sleep at 5 or 6, wake up at 9 and work, and then eventually watch the rest of the season. And thankfully, that was actually my last day. I think it was my last day work. Yes, it was my last day working because then I was on PTO for the rest of the week. So I got to finish the rest of Squid Game right after I finished work. So it just worked out really well for me. So I was able to watch the first 2 episodes, go to work, and then finish the rest of the season between that night and the next morning. And so here are my impressions about it. I will say that I do, again, I will keep saying this, I regret not doing a reaction video because there are a couple of reactions that I'm just like, wow, like, and I'm just like, oh, well, I should have just done this. Especially episode 6, which we'll talk about in a second. But let me just give my overall impressions about season 2. And that is that given the circumstances of just where season 2 had to build off of from season 1, especially again, given the fact that, it doesn't have all the same characters. We're in a different kind of scenario with Gi-hun, as well as, what the returning characters we do get. I think what the creator was able to do with season 2 is perhaps the best case scenario. Season 2 is not as great as season 1. I'll admit to that, but it is still very entertaining to watch. That was maybe the one main thing I was really concerned about, was whether or not I would still have any sense of suspense, thrill, entertainment going into season 2. And there are some elements with season 2 that I really did enjoy. But of course, there's a lot of discussion going on about why season 2, like I've been reading the comments. I've been on the online sphere. A lot of people are not happy with season 2. I think for me personally, I'm not too upset about it. I understand where people are upset about it, which I'll talk about in a second. But I think overall with my impressions, I did enjoy season 2. I did like it. I didn't hate it as a lot of people are trying to apply, or at least are vocalizing their response to in terms of season 2. I did enjoy it. There were definitely some places where I was feeling really intense. I was really I wouldn't say afraid, but I was really like having a lot of goosebumps. I was definitely holding my breath. I'm talking about episode 5, but I think it was episode 6, by the way. Which again, we'll talk about in a minute, but yeah, I think overall I did enjoy season 2 for the most part. Yes, it's not as great as season 1 because I think that because of the fact that there's just so much going on in season 2, whether it be Gi-hun, and then you have the whole detective thing, then you have the whole frontman thing, then you have the whole new characters. It's just that you can see how season 2 is not as tightly knit as season 1 just because of that. You can actually tell that there's some story arcs that are not as consistent. They kind of sometimes go in the background. So I think a very key one I want to mention is the whole detective storyline, where, yes, we do understand that. Oh, by the way, I forgot to mention, this is going to be a spoiler. So just if you have not seen Squid Game at this point, I would say just don't. I would just stop the video at this point because I'm going to be going down into spoiler lane now. So yeah, there you go. Spoiler right there. So okay. So continuing on. One key storyline that I felt like did fall a little flat was the whole detective storyline where they're trying to search for the island, which makes sense because, there isn't a really whole lot to do, especially because of what happened in episode 3. They managed to find the tracker in gi-hun's tooth. So as a result of that, I was like, okay, well, there isn't really a whole lot they can do. They tried their best to kind of incorporate it as much as possible to the season, but you can see how that just felt kind of in the background. Like sometimes I'd be like, oh wait, what's going on with the whole detective thing? It's like, oh, okay. But it's like, okay, we go back to the game. So I have to say that was maybe one storyline that I felt like did fall a little flat. As for the first 2 episodes, I mean, those were really fun to watch just because, I mean, it does give us a little bit of an idea what's going on with gi-hun, giving us an update of what's going on with him in Korea, the fact that he managed to, you know, buy off a sketchy hotel. Then you have the recruiter, how they really managed to somehow find a really effed up way to do rock, paper, scissors, shoot. I mean, I still love the creativity that they managed to do with this season. So there's all of that. I did enjoy that. The performances are still great. I mean, the guy who played the recruiter, I think he was also in Train to Busan. So very familiar actor. I mean, just what he did as a recruiter just to just to sign off like that. I mean, what a iconic way. But yeah, going into season 2, I think, yeah, there were some really good games that we got. I like how we go back to the whole red light, green light thing. It's very nostalgic. We all know the game. We all know how it works. In terms of the new characters, some of the characters I do like, some of them I don't. So let's go down into some of the characters. I feel like that really needs a little bit of discussion because, wow, I know everyone's talking about the Thanos guy because that's the one everyone's talking about. I'm not gonna lie. I mean, he's very annoying. I will say this. He's very annoying. I mean, right off the bat, like the moment that he showed up, I was like, oh my God, he's gonna be the most annoying character ever. And he is. He was very annoying from beginning to end, but also he's very entertaining. I love the fact that we got a little bit more of the comic relief, even though this was supposed to be a little bit more of a serious season, especially given the situation for gi-hun and considering the fact that gi-hun's best friend is also in the game. It's just like the last thing you want is to somehow make things unserious in this game. But I feel like the character Thanos does bring about a right amount of comic relief, even though it's so dark to even say that. But it makes sense. I mean, he is probably one of the highlights in this season. Just the way that he's just kind of, I mean, first off, he is popping pills. So that's just one thing to mention. But it's just the way that he's reacting this game where he's just so pumped up, where he doesn't really give an F what's going on. The fact that he's so, I guess you can say, very cocky, very energized, very confident in the fact that he's going to make it through these games, especially given his situation with what happened with the crypto scam and everything. It's just like, okay, very interesting. And he did end up becoming a highlight. He had some of the best scenes in this show. I mean, you have the one in the red light, green light where he's just jumping all around. Then, I mean, I think this is the one I really love. The Mingle episode. The Mingle episode, where you can see everyone around is like so serious and very intense and very scared, and then you just see him, and I believe it was like player 123, 124, I can't remember his name, but they're just dancing, and they're like the one group, they're like the 2 guys just like dancing around, just having the time of their life, and you're just like, wow. It's like, what a contrast. But it's just like, it's so so engaging and so, wow, it's just, it was hilarious. I mean, those were some, so just seeing the Thanos parts were really hilarious. Like, of course, the whole metaphor for it as well. It's just like, he has the purple here to represent even the Thanos character from MCU. Even the fact that, you know, I think even one of the characters had mentioned that his nails were like the colors of like the Infinity Stones, or I think even one character was like, oh, are you like trying to snatch all the Infinity Stones, which is also funny because when you look at it, I mean, there was like 6 Infinity Stones, there's 6 games. I mean, just the coincidence are there, they're all there. I mean, it makes sense. So I love the play with that as somebody like me who loves MCU. But very annoying character. Happy he does eventually die, but very entertaining character. Very annoying, but very entertaining. I got to say some highlights. Let me just say that the ring around of the song is still in my head to this day. So, yeah. Aside from the other characters, some of the other highlights I would say include the mother and the son. There's some really great dynamic right there, especially because as you get to learn more and more about their dynamic, it's just like, wow, you really love them, especially the mom. I love how she's such a mother to not just her own son, but to everyone else around. Because I feel like that's a very different thing that we got with this season in comparison to last season. How she's trying to help out the pregnant girl who's playing in the games, how she's talking to some of her other teammates, like the transgender woman, which we'll talk about in a second. I mean, we're gonna talk about it in a second. But I think she's quite a highlight. I hope she makes it, because oh my gosh, she's such a sweetheart. I love her. I love how she even grows and evolves and even gets very accepting of how do you pronounce his name? Pronounce her name, sorry. Junjo? Sorry guys. I really tried to get that pronunciation correct, and I think I may have butchered it, but I think it's Junjo? Hunjo? I'm gonna try and pronounce that as Hunjo. So, but yeah, I love her dynamic. I love her character development. I love how she evolved in this season. I really hope she makes it through. But aside from that, right, I think some of the other characters that we do meet, like the crypto guy, the pregnant girl, I think there were some other secondary characters like Minshu, and I can't remember who the other girl was, the one who joins like Thanos and the group. They're all right. I mean, they don't get a whole lot of development, which is kind of what I was trying to say, is that unlike season 1, where the key characters that we do meet, they all have something to contribute to the story. How we get to learn a little bit more about their background, their backstory, why, because of that, it's why we're rooting for them. And they're all appealing in some way, some form, or where they're all antagonizing in some form, some way. That wasn't necessarily the case with this one. Like, for instance, Minshu is a character. Yes, you can see that he's just a boy who's just trying to be accepted, but also trying to do the right thing. And it's just like he's feeling really lost. And it's just like he's just trying to adapt to the situation. But it's like I haven't really been able to connect with that character as much as some of the other ones, especially in the end where we get that whole death that happens with that one girl. It's just like I didn't feel it as much as I felt with some of the other characters in season 1. So I think, again, it's just like there's a lot of inconsistency with the character development. The fact that there are so many more characters that we are focused on this season is also probably why there's a little bit more of this disjointedness and why it's a little bit more loose, because of the fact that there's just so many more characters that we're trying to learn. Like, it's almost like we're having our own Game of Thrones situation here, where we're trying to learn like 40 different characters. Whereas I feel like season 1, we only had to like maybe learn just the main 10, max 12, right? And so because of that, you can see where there's some inconsistency with season 2. That is not to say that we don't have one great character in season 2. And again, that's Junjo. I hope I'm saying that correctly, or Hunjo, the transgender woman. I have to say, the best new character this season, because, oh my God, I've never seen someone who has really been basically the character who's carrying everyone from beginning to the end. She is very motivated. She has a goal in mind, and yet she has a story as to why she wants to win, and you empathize with her, you sympathize with her, and it's just like you're rooting for her to win. It's like, it's really funny because back then we were really hoping that gi-hun was going to make it through, and now it's just like everyone forgets about gi-hun. It's like, I want her to win. We want her to make it through. We want her to go to Thailand and get her surgery and find and get her happy life that she can have in Thailand. So it's just like, wow, I'm really like gonna be keeping my hopes up and be keeping my fingers crossed about her character. Just because thankfully she does make it through at least to season 2. Especially because of what happens in the season 2 finale. It's just like suddenly she just shows up and it's like a rock star and like the MVP. I mean, honestly, great stuff. And I again, she's the one who's been carrying everyone around. I mean, great character. I think one great addition to this season, without a doubt. Now, going into the characters that do return, I mean, we have gi-hun, we have Jung-bae, we have Jung-ho, and then we also have the frontman. So let's get down into just kind of the stories and just the twist and everything like that. And I have to say, there are a couple things I want to address, right? So episode 3 with the whole frontrunner twist, I mean, that was brilliant. I have to say, that was a brilliant way to integrate him into the story, because I don't think a lot of us would have expected him to do that, especially to be player 001. I was like, oh, of course. We're gonna be playing on that again, huh? It's like, I guess we can never trust 001 ever, right? I mean, let's be honest, this all could have been resolved if, Jung-ho just had shown Jin-ho what his brother looked like, and maybe we just wouldn't have this betrayal at the end, you know what I'm saying? That could have resolved a lot of things, I know a lot of people are just thinking about that, but that being aside, just that twist with the front man joining games, because I mean, the moment I realized that, just like, holy shit, that means that gi-hun's not the only returning player, because now we have 2 returning players. And what makes it so incredible, just the details of it. And I love about Squid Game is that there are always these details. Even if this season isn't as greatly, isn't as tight-knit as season 1, I still love the details. Because then you still have the main player in one spectrum being the last player, and then you have another major player on the other side of the spectrum as 001. So you have gi-hun, who's the last player, who is 456, I believe is his number. And then you have the front man, who's 001. And it's just like, wow, I was like, oh my god, this is incredible. And them being previous winners, it's just like, holy shit. I mean, this is incredible. This is quite the twist. I mean, I still remember, I was like, oh my god. It's like, oh my god. So yeah, one reaction I wish I could have captured. But not a big deal. But I have to say, like, I have to give credits to the actor. I know he's a very popular actor. I mean, he actually showed up. I think he played Shadow Storm in G.I. Joe Retaliation. So he's a pretty popular Korean actor from what I've read. But I have to say, just what we were just watching the frontman and just what his motives were going into the season. It's just like, I was having so many creepy crawlies in my back. I was just like holding my hand tight, just like, oh my god, at any moment this guy could like snap and betray them, because that's probably what's going to happen. And I mean, it's very clear why he entered the games, of course, because gi-hun's there to stop the game, he's there to continue the games. So why is he there? Like, he's probably gonna be trolling the shit out of gi-hun, but it's like, okay, but he's also going to try and interact with him. So what's going to be his game? What's going to be his deal? And I think what's really incredible about this season is just seeing a closer look at who the front man is, because we really don't know who he really is. Now, we do get a little bit more detail about him, of course, and why he entered the game, especially the fact that something happened with his pregnant wife. His pregnant wife didn't make it, even after he went into the games. And so at some point in between the time that he won the game and just before gi-hun had entered the game himself, that he became the overseer of the game. So we know that, and that kind of goes into my theory when I get into that point. But having said that, right, it's just like, okay, what's going to be his play? And what's really intriguing is just seeing his reaction throughout the season. I mean, in the second game with the whole, I think it was like, what was it, the six-legged race, you can see the point where he's like, celebrating with everyone else when, Hoonju and his group do make it, and just seeing him celebrate, it's just like, wait, like, did he forget that he's a player? Like, that he's the front runner, that he can just go in and out of the game or something like that? And I wonder if he finally was starting to conform himself into the games as well, or whether or not he himself was intrigued by the games, or he's like really obsessed by it. And then the more you watch it, it's like you can see some snippets of his character where it's like you wonder whether or not he's being very genuine about his sincerity, especially in one case where he's talking to the pregnant girl and asking her, and telling her that, once she gets out of the games, to go and check out with the doctor, and even offers her a milk. It's just like, I mean, there seems to be some sincerity with this character, or like a sense of humanity in him that's just like, oh, maybe, who knows, maybe there is a chance that humanity can be, can actually have some good, can actually have some morals, can be very ethical. And this is going into like a big factor about this whole idea of this game. I think that I really appreciate, and it's like a very thematic point about it, is that what really made season 1 and season 2 very different is that season 1, I think what made it so great is that we got to see these individual characters and understand their motives and how they react into the moment. And again, seeing how different humans will react in terms of desperation and greed. And we saw them more in a more individualistic stance. And I think that really worked in season 1 because of that. And of course, that makes a lot more sense why that season was so tight-knit, because of the fact that we have so much character development and so much of this evolving arc for each character. And I think that worked in that case. What I liked about this season is that instead of just trying to replicate a lot of that from season 1, what this season does is that we see a little bit more of this, of a bigger idea of the social commentary about greed and desperation and selfishness, in a more community stance. Because at least in the first season, it's like they do the vote that one time, they do succeed in leaving the games, and then for those who want to re-enter, that's their own decision, right? I mean, at that point, it's just like, oh, it makes sense why they re-enter the games, because they want to. They're all desperate. And they had the choice, and they made that choice. But now it's like we see in this season where now it's just a more community sort of environment. I think that's the best way to say it, community environment, where yes, there is a democracy where you can cast a vote. But when people are so blinded by greed and people are so blinded by their selfishness, I mean, well, basically they're blinded by their greed. They're very desperate to get out of debt. And because of that, they've now have to make a choice, a very tough choice, where whether they want to leave the games and let everyone else get equal shares of it, or would they get too greedy and, continue the game in the expense of basically adding more bloodshed to gain all that monetary, right? And I think that this is a very interesting concept that we have this season, because the whole point of gi-hun coming back into the game is to prevent any more of that bloodshed. He wants it to stop. He wants the game to stop. He doesn't want anyone else to deal with the same crap that he went through in his own season, where everyone dies, everyone he loves dies, and now he has to live with this survivor guilt. And let alone the fact that he has 45.6 billion million ones. And that's something that he acknowledges that he won because there was just so much bloodshed involved in it, and he doesn't want anyone else to do that. Yet we see how people are reacting in season 2, where, people don't really give a crap about the fact that people are going to die because they're more concerned about themselves. And if it means that a whole community can join in a whole similar stance, that, okay, well, if we know for a fact that the chances are great, and that I can at least somehow make up so much money, if it means, more bloodshed, then we're just going to continue off with the games. And it's just a very interesting stance of seeing a much different social commentary in this season. I do appreciate that with this season, because the last thing you want is just to be a full copycat of what happened in season 1. You don't want to have the same characters doing the same things. You don't want to have the same conversations. You don't want to have the same you don't have to have the same kind of conversations and same kind of dilemmas. It's just like you want something different. I think that that's what I really liked about the seasons. That the more I watch it, it's like, wow. I mean, it's really interesting to see kind of the more community aspect of it, and it's not just the bad side of it as well. I mean, we saw some good side of it in I believe it was episode 3, episode 4, whichever one was the 6-legged race. I think that was a very good case of seeing a much better side of humanity, where, you have the 6-legged race. The first set of, the first group didn't make it through. Everyone is feeling so down because now it's like, okay, well, this seems like an impossible task. But it wasn't until the second group that they actually gave them hope, and seeing people cheer, and then actually people encouraging the groups to try and make it through. It's just like, wow, like this is a very interesting concept, like just to see how community tries to support each other. But then at the same time, when it comes to coming back to the games, when the actual thrill of it is done, it's like, okay, now we get down to business. Let's see what we want to do. Oh, by the way, that's not enough money. Well, we want to continue the games if it means having to kill off more people. So very interesting concept. I really love that they actually go deeper into social commentary. I know a lot of people were kind of arguing about that, just like, well, it's just still a copycat. It's like, well, it's not really a copycat, because season 2 actually still does something very different in terms of showcasing just the human behavior in a more community stance, unlike season 1, where it's a little bit more in an individual stance. And I think that it really works in this case, because it still does feel like a very different kind of game because of the circumstances that they have this time around. The conditions are very, very different. And I think it really works here. I mean, that's something that I was very intrigued by. I was like, oh, I'm catching all these things. And a lot of people are also arguing that, oh, things like this wouldn't happen. It's like, humans are actually, can actually think this way. I mean, let's just, I think the timing of this right now is like very interesting too, given some of the current events that's happened as well. So, it proves a point that, this is how humans will behave. And I think this is a very intriguing concept and very intriguing execution of showcasing that kind of that storytelling. And it even contributes to what happens by the end of the season, where gi-hun has to basically, he understands that, there's no use of trying to persuade the ones who, picked the O groups, the O's and X. So I want to talk about the O groups. It's best that, the best choice that they have at this point is to take action, which may require having to do some sacrificing if it means having to end this game once and for all and trying to save as many people as possible if this is the only route that he has left. And I think that this also adds to a lot, again, the whole dilemma and some of the choices that needs to be made, and gi-hun's own kind of conflictions and what he needs to do to try and save as many people as possible. But knowing, again, that this continues on with these votes, it's just like, okay, this is my only option. We might have to kill off some people if it means having to save as many more people as possible. I think that, again, very intriguing concept, great social behavior that was here. I know a lot of people did not like the whole idea of them doing the revotes and how they take so much time on that, but I think there's a reason for that, because we're seeing a little bit more of a different style, different environment of these games, that it's just not going to be same as season 1. So and that's one of the reasons why I did enjoy season 2 for the most part, because it's still a very different game, whether it be just the people, the environment, the conditions, the players, even the games. I mean, I will say oh my god, because I will say they did play a little safe in the first 2 rounds, because you're just like, oh, okay, well, these are all the main characters who are going to make it. Cool, okay, whatever. But I will admit, when we got to episode 6, which is the Mingle game, oh my god, I cannot tell you how stressed I was. I think that was the most stressful episode I've ever had in my life, because I'm literally sweating. I'm literally breathing very heavy. I'm literally just curling in my blanket, just like, oh my god, are they going to make it? It was just so stressful. I mean, I think at one point I had to like kind of pause and just, I think once the game had ended, I paused just to kind of have a breather again, just because of how stressful it was. Mingle is the most stressful game ever, just because of the stakes. I mean, anyone could have been killed, and someone, one key player did, well, I wouldn't say key player, but one very sweet character did get killed off. And it's just like, wow, this is the game that we do remember. It does bring back memories a little bit from season 1, especially, I think it was episode 6, where we lost, oh my god, Ollie, these two really, it's like, oh. But yeah, so yeah, it seems to be that, not only can we not trust 001 players, but now episode 6 are going to be the most traumatic episodes from what I've learned. So, because I believe season 1, the one with the whole Marbles episode, was episode 6. So, there you have it, guys. But yeah, Mingle really stressed me the heck out. I still have memories about it, but again, we have some really great highlights as well because of the Thanos thing. So, and I still sing the song, so that's one thing. Now, having said that, again, there's a lot of pros or there's a lot of cons I mentioned. Let's get down right to the ending, because I feel like that's the one that a lot of people are very, very divided about. It's quite divisive. I've been reading online about it, and I get it. I truly do get it. Just the way that it ends, like, I mean, no one wants to end off on a cliffhanger. You want to know what's going to happen next. A lot of people are going to say, oh, this is a money grab thing. It's just like, yeah, I get the points of all this. But I will say that I wasn't as totally upset about the ending as a lot of people were. I think it's just because of the fact that I'm aware of the context of what this, the show is going to be. We already know that season 3 is going to be the end of the season. And if you actually been reading a lot of the interviews, you would know that the creator had actually initially had wanted to do season 2, I think, for like 10 episodes. But then he had to rework it because he felt like it needed to be divided a little bit more. So instead of just doing a one long season 2, he divided into 2 seasons, which then would eventually be season 2 and season 3. So technically speaking, season 2 is like season 2 part 1, and season 3 would have been season 2 part 2. But they're just going to make that season 3. And that's the reason why they had to split it, because of the fact that he just wanted to kind of give it a little bit more time to kind of separate the stories a little bit more. And so that is the reason why it's like this. A cliffhanger was there for a reason. And just so everyone knows, season 2 and season 3 were filmed back to back. So all of season 3 has been completed. It's just a matter of knowing when it's going to be released. So we are going to get season 3. It's going to happen. It's already been done. There's no casting needed. No, it's all done. It's just a matter of giving time for season 2 to kind of get the hype out, get popular, get a lot of people to go check it out. And then once that hype dies down, then we're probably going to get season 3. We know season 3 is going to come out in 2025 for sure. So as to when is very questionable. I would not be surprised if it's going to be coming out more towards the end of the year, especially if they want to try and avoid putting any competition between Squid Game and Stranger Things season 5, because Stranger Things is also ending with season 5. So that's another whole big show that Netflix has to deal with. So it's like you want to try and space that out. But season 3 is going to be the end of the show. We'll know for a fact what's going to happen. So yeah, that basically kind of sums up my review right there. I enjoyed season 2. I do like a good chunk of the new characters. The front man having a much bigger role is really great, just to see kind of his psychology, his psyche going to the season. Although it's just like you're kind of seeing the mind tricks of him. It's like, is he trolling? Is he being sincere? I do think that there are some cases where he was really trolling, like especially in the six-legged game where he was messing up on the spinal tap, because I think in the first 2-3 tries, he was using his right hand, but then the final try, he used his left hand. So he was definitely trolling there. But I think there are some cases where he was being very sincere about his feelings, because there were some cases where he's like looking at Gi-hun and he feels as though like maybe he might kind of sympathize with him, or maybe he's having a change of heart, maybe. I don't know. But then I think at the very end, when he suggested doing the rebellion, I think that's probably where he started to kind of decide to kind of do the Uno reverse card and go back to where he was, which is to be the front man. But of course, I think another case of that is just the fact that he wants, Gi-hun to face the consequences of his actions, and especially in going back into the games and trying to stop the games as much as possible. So I think that could be also another reason why that he did all that, just to kind of play with him. So, but we'll see how season 3 goes, and we'll talk a little bit more about that. But I think that just about wraps up kind of my review right there. It's still a very good season. I still enjoyed it. It's still very suspenseful. There's definitely some new characters I am rooting for. Holy crap! I hope. How do you pronounce her name? Hunju. I hope she makes it. I mean, I do hope Gi-hun makes it through. But although the way that the shaman was mentioning something, I was like, but yeah, we'll see how things go with season 3. So let's go right down into my discussion about it. So I already mentioned about the fact that we're going to get season 3 for sure. That's gonna be the end of the show. As to when it's gonna come out, again, it's probably gonna be maybe towards the latter half of 2025, just because again, we just got the show now. We're about to go into the new year, so that's one key thing. And again, you don't want to have Stranger Things season 5 and Squid Game season 3 competing with each other. These are literally Netflix's two biggest shows on their platform. So there's that. What's going to happen? I know a lot of people are talking about the credit scene that just happened. So I'm not too familiar with what that character is, because I've been seeing a lot of people are talking about it, and apparently it's like based on a book or something, like a Jack and kind of like reminiscent of Jack and Jill. I don't know if that's true or not, but apparently that's like a key thing, and that's actually going to, I think he's like even worse than the other one. It's just like, okay, that's great. I don't know if that's implying that that's gonna be the next game, or if that's, I think, game 4. Or if we're having a whole different group of people playing a whole different side of the Squid Game in a different island. Who knows? Maybe. I don't know. We'll probably get those answers, hopefully, whenever the trailer or whatever comes out for season 3. Of course, the big question is going to be what's going to happen with Gi-hun. Why did the front man keep him alive? I think, again, it's the key thing is that he wants him to see the consequences of his own actions. We saw him just literally watch his best friend die in front of him, given the fact that they went and did this rebellion that he himself had ideated. So it's just now that this is just only the beginning of tormenting him, I think. So we'll see where that goes. I think it's not going to be pretty going, moving forward. I still wonder what the shaman means by the fact that he was meant to be here for a reason, because she was staring at him and the pregnant girl. It's like, does this imply that Gi-hun's going to die? I don't know. Who knows? We'll see. I will say that one training things I wanted to mention, and one reasons why I wanted to do a little bit more of a discussion, is why Gi-hun is here and why the front man is confronting him. And I think this is actually a popular theory that's been going around, which is something that I didn't think was going to be a popular theory, but apparently it is. I think one of the things that needs to be mentioned is that both gi-hun and the frontman were former winners. And it's really intriguing the fact that the frontman managed to become an overseer for his game 5 years after his game. So I do wonder if this is implying that the frontman may actually consider gi-hun as a possible successor to the role. I think that's a very popular one that everyone's been talking about. Maybe this is one of the reasons why he got him back into the game and seeing the consequences of his own actions to see if he's going to have a change of heart himself. Who knows? Maybe that could be the case. That's something that I was kind of thinking about could be a possible endgame going into season 3, because like what could it be that he might actually become the next frontman, or at least one of the main, I guess you can say one of the main executives of the actual games. Who knows? That was something that I was thinking about myself, and apparently that seems to be a very popular theory going around. And I think it kind of checks out, because if this happened with the frontman, I would not be surprised if this happened with gi-hun, because again, gi-hun is a previous winner, and he's also in the games again. So it's just like, where does this go from here? So that's something that I was kind of eyeing a little bit, what's kind of like maybe a possible theory going on. But I think what's very clear is that going into season 3, there's three ways there's 3 ways that things will happen with gi-hun and where his ending is going to be. One is he's either going to die, possibly maybe sacrificing his life, maybe trying to save someone, maybe he was trying to save the pregnant girl, or he might make it through, he might be able to stop the game in some way, of some form. Maybe the frontman could be helping out someone, because I know there's a whole theory behind that. Or the fact that he might actually become the next frontman. It could be far more tragic than we would actually expect. So it could be one of those 3 ways. I know there's also another discussion going on about what's really going on with the frontman and his kind of intentions. Just because, again, it's just like he goes into the games, he's cheering, and he's having quite a time being involved in the games, and yet he comes out at such a breaking point. It's just like, will this stick, or is he himself going to betray the investors and the VIPs? Like, is that going to happen? Is he going to team up with his own brother? We don't know yet, but I think a lot of people are hoping that maybe he himself had a change of heart, especially given the fact that there is a pregnant girl in the games. There's that. The fact that the fisherman, okay, so I knew the fisherman was like very, very sketchy, because of, especially as we were getting more and more deep into the episodes, because I was just like noting some things about him. Like, for one thing, there was one scene where, they had gone to like a decoy island, or an island where they had planted kind of like the bomb. And it's just like, when you look at the reaction of the ship guy, of the boat guy, you're just like, he's not flinching. Everyone's flinching, but he's not flinching. And I was like, I think he might be working for the games, and indeed he is. So that makes a lot more sense. I think there's a very popular theory going on that he actually might be the guy who actually grabs all the, all the organs, and he's the one who's able to transplant them back into the mainland, which is very plausible. So that's one possibility. I think he also might be employed by the frontman as well, because the frontman knows about the operation. It's just a matter of just making sure that it's done fairly. Like, it's not just making sure that, because I think the reason why he was upset in the other game, the last season, was because of the fact that they were exchanging things and giving one player an advantage, which would have been very unfair. So that's the reason why all that happened in season 1, and they're not going to repeat that in season 2. So who knows? I mean, that could be the case, but that's something that I've noticed as well. Let me also just talk about the fact that, again, I mentioned earlier that Squid Game is literally Netflix's biggest show. Like, the biggest show, because it's their most viewed series ever. And yet, it's like, do you really think that Netflix is going to just stop at season 3? Because, I mean, let's be honest. I think that for a show like Squid Game, you can't really milk out. I mean, we're already milking out as much as, we can with the series. I mean, yeah, but even given that, there's just so much limitations and trying to continue it beyond season 3. I mean, I was really surprised when I heard the news that they were going to do season 3, but thankfully it was going to be the last season. I was like, okay, at least it's going to be the last season. But that meant like, okay, what does this mean for gi-hun? It's like, he's going to do like 3 games now. But thankfully that's not going to be the case. I think it's just more, and now we know that it's just a season 2. It's just more sort of cliffhanger than really just, doing all 6 games in one season and then just doing a repeat of that in season 3. But But it makes sense that there's just no way that you can really extend this show beyond season 3. It doesn't make any sense unless you can replace gi-hun with a different character, or somehow the games continue in some way, some form, which would then imply that maybe gi-hun was probably going to die at some point, or maybe like that. Something like that, right? And I think in a case like this, it's just there's just so much you can do with a story like this, where you just have this one character. It's like you can't really extend it beyond beyond 3 seasons. So I'm happy that it's going to end at season 3. But even given that, right? I mean, do we really think that Netflix is just going to stop there? No. I mean, they already have tried to do ways to kind of continue off this legacy. For instance, they have that game show, the reality TV show, like the one that's like reality, where I believe it's called Squid Game The Challengers, so they have that. But I do want to talk about this whole rumor about the American spin-off, remake, etc. Because there have been reports about the fact that David Fincher is apparently going to be working on a Squid Game spin-off / remake. We don't know exactly the details of it, but there has been a rising rumor for it. And recently, again, I mean, it's still a rumor right now. We don't even have confirmation about what's really going on, but I believe the creator himself had mentioned that there is some way of developing something that's going to be like American, like, kind of version. It's just that he doesn't really go into too much details about it. Like, we don't know exactly if it's going to be the adventure, if it's going to be a remake, if it's going to be a spin-off. Personally speaking, I hope it's just going to be a spin-off, so an extension of that universe, because trying to do a remake of Squid Game, it would be just really redundant. It wouldn't really make a lot of sense. Especially because I feel like, given the fact that you're going to do an American remake, the culture is going to be quite different. So that means they would have to incorporate different games. You would have to incorporate different culture. Like, the culture in Korea is not going to be the same culture here in America. So that's another key thing. So the characters can't just be the copycats that we see in Squid Game season 1, heck, season 2. So that's another thing. I think that the best approach to doing an American version of Squid Game would just be to do an extension of it. So a spin-off. So giving like so instead of just making it so that, the Squid Game is something that is more contained in Korea, we can actually see that this is a far more international problem that's happening, which makes sense because, again, we see the VIPs. They all are Americans. They're all billionaires. So that means that, if this is if they're the ones who are investing in games like this, we would imagine that there might be more out there. I think at one point there may have been even a German kind of version. I don't know if there was one. I feel like there was like a news about this. So if there was a German version, then I would imagine there's going to be an American version, just to expand on the whole idea, the whole concept of Squid Game, is that it's not just reserved to just Korea, but it's happened internationally, and it makes sense. I mean, there is a wealth problem worldwide. It's a worldwide problem, and so that would make a lot more sense. I hope that's going to be the approach for it. I do hope it's not going to be a remake, but at the same time, I am happy that if it does end up being David Fincher, I don't think there's any other director who would be best suited for doing a expansion of Squid Game than with David Fincher. He's absolutely great. I mean, I love Mindhunter, and I'm still kind of upset about the fact that we still haven't gotten season 3, and we're probably never going to get season 3. So this is the best case scenario that I'm going to ever get. So if this is what we're going to get from David Fincher, at least it's Squid Game. So I hope that if it's going to be something that's going to be in development, that this is the approach that they do take, because I know, again, this has been a rising rumor going on for the last few months now, and the fact that the creator himself has kind of given a little bit more context of the fact that there is some development. Again, not giving too much details about it. It does sound as so that there is going to be some kind of extension of the Squid Game universe. So there's that. But yeah, I think that is all I can really say about Squid Game. I mean, I've had a really good time watching it. I will say that going into season 3, that, it does pick off from season 2. Again, I don't know if there's going to be enough twists and turns left to go into season 3, because I feel like because I mean, again, I thought there wasn't going to be any twists going to season 2, and there were some really good twists. So I just hope that going to season 3, we're going to get at least a similar kind of, environment, conditions, suspense. I feel like the suspense is what I really want. If you can keep me suspenseful, then it's like, okay, you're in the right track. I just hope that whatever happens in season 3 at least pays off from what we saw in season 2, just because of, again, with the whole ending. I didn't personally hate the ending, but I totally get why a lot of people are upset about it, because it's just really abrupt and it's really blunt. It's just like, why would you just end there? But then again, I know the context of what's happening with the whole series behind the scenes. It's just like, okay, well, we already know we're gonna have season 3. We just don't know if we're gonna have like 5 or 6 episodes. We don't know what's gonna come out in 2025. But thankfully, it's not going to be no more than a year's wait, because it's going to come out next year. So I just hope that it's going to at least end off on a good note and see where it's going to take some of the characters. I'm going to be crossing my fingers for some of them, but I'm right now in a whole phase of just jumping into Squid Game. I'm like literally watching videos over and over again. I'm literally listening to the carousel song like over and over again. I just felt like I just needed to kind of just emit all my energy about Squid Game and my enthusiasm for it, because honestly, I think season 2, I still enjoyed it. I did enjoy it. I was very entertained by it. I know not as much as season 1, but I want to have my discussion about it, and I feel like this was the opportunity to do it and talk about it with you guys and give my impressions about it, as well as kind of like my thoughts going into season 2, as well as just what's been really going on with the universe itself. So I think that's all I really have to say about Squid Game season 2, as well as just overall season of Squid Game. But let me hear your thoughts now that you've heard my opinions about it, now you've heard my kind of input on what's going on, as well as the review discussions and just season 2 in general. But let me know your thoughts, having, kind of watched it. Everyone's talking about Squid Game right now. So, like, I mean, this is the best time to really just be discussing this. But let me know your thoughts. If you have seen all of season 2, what are your thoughts about it in comparison to season 1? Do you think it's just as good as season 1, or do you think it's quite a letdown? I think, again, I already get my impression about it. I think the themes are there. It's very different, but it works. But I do see where things are a little bit more lackluster than season 1, but maybe you have different opinions about it. What are your thoughts about the ending? I know a lot of people are really, really upset about the ending. I'm not too upset about it, but maybe you have a different perspective about it. What are your thoughts knowing the fact that we are going to have a season 3? It's going to be the final for sure. Knowing the fact that it's already been filmed, does that change your perspective of the fact that, of your feelings about the season 2 ending? What do you think this is going to be? What do you think is going to happen in season 3? Like, do you think there's going to be another twist, any turns? What do you think this means for the front man as well as gi-hun? Like, are we going to have more twists and turns going into season 3? Who's going to survive? Who are your favorite characters in season 2? Like, some of the new characters, as well as just any other thoughts or concerns about the Squid Game universe, content, whatever. But yeah, there's a lot to really talk about. So let me know your thoughts below. Make sure to like and subscribe.